Welcome back to another episode of Biohacking with Brittany, where we explore cutting-edge methods to enhance our health and well-being. I am your host, Brittany Ford, and I am so thankful that you are joining today. This episode is one of the most interesting ones and one of my favorite ones I have recorded in the last few months. I was so intrigued by diving into childhood and baby even neurodevelopment and chronic health issues. And I have Dr. Brandon Crawford on the show, and he specializes in this field of functional neurology and photobiomodulation and what we can do with, red light therapy with the brain. So fascinating. I learned so much from this episode. We talk about, like I was saying, kids, their development. We talk about autism and why is it increasing? Why have the statistics gone up? What is causing that? And then what can we do about it? What do we do about the increase of kids on this neurodiversity scale that we're seeing? What do you do when you have a baby or kid with delayed speech impediment and speech issues in general? And, we kind of go everywhere with it, but man, was it fascinating to just look at this and think, okay, what in our lifestyle, in our society is now impacting the brain development in this next generation? So we talk about screen time, we talk about nutrition and lifestyle and sleep, and obviously red light therapy, photobiomodulation. It was really fascinating. And I love these episodes because they're very relevant to my life right now, but it also just sheds light on what so many parents, so many people are dealing with, and provides solutions for a way to heal and get through that in a very different way, which I love and which we're all about. So strap in, you're going to love this one. Obviously, if you have specific questions about your case or your kid or your situation, reach out to Dr. Brandon, right? Like that's what he's there for. That's what his team is there for. He's there to help people out just like you. And he was a keynote speaker at the biohacking conference this year. So I think he's going to be there at the next one. I'm sure he will be for next year. So, going to places like that is really helpful as well to get solutions so you can kind of meet these people, get yourself in the right room and learn from these experts. Before we dive in, let's do DM of the day. This person wrote, "Hi, Brittany, your holistic approach to health and wellness has been inspiring to follow. Thank you. Your podcast episodes discussing the use of biohacking for pain management have been particularly insightful. I'd love to hear more about specific biohacking strategies you recommend for chronic pain relief, especially those that focus on reducing inflammation and improving mobility." Oh, interesting. Thank you for all the info that you are sharing. Cool. Okay. So pain relief, chronic pain relief, and reducing inflammation, improving mobility. A lot we can say here. I did an episode on this a while ago. So go back on my website, go through the archives and type in those like keywords and you'll kind of see the podcast episodes that come up that are related to that. There's a lot you can do for chronic pain. Oh my gosh, where would I even start? Man, there's so many things to think about with this. So nutrition is obviously super important, whole foods diet, making sure that you're getting in enough fats and protein, vitamins, minerals, that type of thing, like kind of like the basics. Like you really need to have the low hanging fruit dialed in, I would say. So reducing processed food, reducing wheat and gluten, reducing inflammatory foods for you. Gluten is inflammatory for most people, if not all, especially maybe not all, but especially if you're in North America and you have the type of gluten that we have here that has like glyphosate on it and has been like modified and isn't as much of a whole food as you would find in other places like in Europe. So just really kind of sticking to this idea of whole foods as much as you can, I think is an obvious place to start. And then on top of that, adding in the nutrients that you think are potentially missing. So I would definitely, when I'm thinking about pain, magnesium has to be in your stack. Has to be, absolutely. Get the one from Bioptimizers. It has all 7 types of magnesium in it. And I would experiment with your tolerance of it and how much you can take. So they actually on Bioptimizer's website, and even when you order it, it comes with this like little handout that is like this, I forgot what they call it, but it's basically like a magnesium test. I think you do it for about a week and you kind of find your tolerance on how much magnesium you can take every day. And you know you've taken too much when you are getting things like diarrhea, essentially. So it's too much on the bowels. Look into that. That is something I would definitely add in. And then for reducing inflammation, there is so much here. So many supplements, but I don't want to just like give you supplements. What I would do is oh my gosh, what would I do? I would do sauna for sure, multiple times a week, which is also actually going to be really great for your chronic pain. Try to get into a sauna. Try to find, actually, I would say whatever sauna you have access to is great. If it's a traditional, if it's an infrared light sauna, if it's a steam room, even whatever you have access to, use it. I would try to do 4 times a week if I were you. Build up your tolerance for how long you're staying in and the amount of heat exposure that you can handle in terms of temperature. This is going to be really great for detoxing and cleansing out the body. It's also going to be really great for blood flow and helping that throughout your body as well, and bring the oxygen and nutrients to these different areas that might be painful for you. Something I would also add in during these sauna sessions would be stretching in the sauna. Once you're nice and warm and your muscles and everything is nice and loose and kind of like easier to stretch it out. Work on that mobility while you're in that heated space. Be cognizant of your heart rate, right? Like don't do anything super intense, but you can stretch in these places and get benefit from it. So that's what I do. And that's what I would really recommend. When you are in the sauna, of course, you must focus on replenishing the minerals that you're losing through sweat. So take, electrolytes like Element. I'm not an affiliate for Element, but a bunch of people are. You can find one for a discount or something like that because I know Element is quite expensive. So I would really look at electrolytes and adding those in and drinking plenty of water. There's so much I can say about this. So that's kind of where I would start. So we talked about nutrition, a little bit of supplements, a really robust sauna practice, I think is great. You would add cold therapy to that, which reduces inflammation. What I like and recommend and might be the golden standard for you to work up to, everybody's different, but kind of what I would try to work up to is something like 20 minutes in the sauna, cold exposure, 20 minutes in the sauna, cold exposure, and doing that 3 times. So you're kind of looking at like an hour, maybe hour 15 total of like this whole cold hot series. Your cold could be a cold shower. It could be a ice bath. It could be a cold dunk, whatever you basically can handle is what I would try to do. So think about that. There's, I've talked about cold exposure a lot on this show. So there's a lot you can go back and listen to. And I will send you some voice notes with more information. These are just kind of a few places that I would start. And I'll send you more information. But that is, I think, man, if you do things like that, like if you started like some sort of sauna practice like that, if you made sure that you were eating foods that were whole foods, you weren't focused on processed foods, you took out things like alcohol, things like that, and you really got some more minerals in your diet, I think you would be on the path to really working on this chronic pain that you are dealing with. Thank you for writing in. I hope that was somewhat helpful. Again, I will follow up with more messages to you. And before we jump into this really great episode that I loved, a shout out to Nuchido. Nuchido is a company that focuses on NAD. Talking about inflammation, NAD is so key. So a lot of people in the biohacking space are super interested in longevity, and NAD kind of goes with that. So NAD is this molecule that declines with age. And now there's so much research going into how do we increase it? How do we reduce cellular aging? And Nuchido has a supplement stack that basically is swimming very upstream. So instead of taking precursors to NAD, which some other supplements do, Nuchido and Dr. Nicola, who I've had on the show twice, she has looked at it and said, okay, what are the mechanisms that are causing the NAD to decline? And how do we improve those mechanisms in the body so that they naturally increase NAD? Now, I love this approach. I love the approach of root cause, really, really peeling back the layers and understanding things. So I think this is a very interesting way to kind of go about it. I take 3 in the morning at 3 at night. No, not at night. Sorry, midday, because I think that's super important. And she's really making a name for herself and her company in the biohacking space. We also love to support women on this show. So, I just love seeing woman-founded companies. So try Nuchido, use my discount code biohackingbrittany. Increase your NAD levels, everybody. We all need to be doing it despite what your age is. And a shout out to Bioptimizers. Speaking of magnesium, you want a free bottle, that's what I said, a free bottle of magnesium. This is your last week to get it. They're only doing free bottles of magnesium for July and August. Okay. So this is the last time that you can get it. Use the link in my show notes and on my website, and you will get a free bottle. Magnesium is something that I don't know, I couldn't live without. I couldn't live without my magnesium supplement. I take it every single day. We all need it. If you're feeling stressed, sore muscles, can't sleep, overworked, irritable, quick to anger, anxiety, depression, all these things. Magnesium is involved in over 300 pathways in the body. So it's super important. All right. Enjoy this podcast episode. I think you will get a lot out of it, and I will catch you soon for another one. Welcome to Biohacking with Brittany. I am so excited that you are joining me today. We are diving into functional neurology and photobiomodulation with Dr. Brandon Crawford. He has over 25 years of experience in this space and really is helping to advance our understanding of how light therapy can revolutionize our approach to chronic pain, brain health, and much more. He was actually just a keynote speaker at Dave Asprey's biohacking conference, which I wasn't able to go to this year, but I went last year and had a great time. And he also has his podcast, the Longevity Formula podcast. So today we're going to dive into the science of photobiomodulation, discuss its impact on neuroplasticity, explore its profound benefits in the biohacking space with chronic pain, and even how it can help boost our immune system. So much to unpack here. Dr. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be on. I love your podcast. I love everything you're doing. And yeah, let's explore all these topics. This sounds fun to me. I love that intro. One thing, so even though you can't see me, I haven't been doing this for 25 years. I've been doing this for about 15 years. I know I may look like it with all my white hair, but
That's so funny. Yeah, I just read it in your, form. It was 25 years, but you know what? 15 years, 25 years, it's still a long time. So good on you. And I love that. Before we dive into photobiomodulation, I really want to hear about your experience at Dave Asprey's conference. How was it? Like maybe some key takeaways.
Absolutely. Well, as always, it was an amazing conference. I loved this year because it was their 10th annual. So they really went all out. I think Dave did a fantastic job really pulling together some heavy hitters. I, of course, had a blast because I spent a lot of money there. I bought a lot of new toys, which was fun because there were several things that I wanted to experience. Things like the arc bed, which is this really cool photobiomodulation bed, which has different wavelengths of light that I haven't really played with yet. And I combine it with a lot of PEMF technology and some other things on the quantum level. So that was really fun. I'm super excited to get that into the practice. I'm on the board for Sunlight and Saunas, so I was able to catch up with that team and see the new technology that they have coming out. There's a new sauna coming out this year. I was able to really just connect with some industry leaders that I haven't been able to connect with personally yet. I've spoken with them several times. Also was able to catch up with Damon John. So that was cool. That was perfect timing, by the way, because he was coming off the stage as I was coming on the stage. So that was absolutely amazing being able to catch up with him. I love the message that he delivered. It was one of hope, one of inspiration. He was funny. It was just a really good insight into his life and really how he ended up in this biohacking space, which I think is a similar story to so many of us, someone that begins to struggle with a chronic illness, and traditional medicine just doesn't really have any answers. And that's how a lot of us find our place here, So it was a great experience. I know Dave personally, and told him, man, you really did a good job. And he did. Like, he really did pull together yet another amazing experience.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I had a blast when I went last year. I do encourage people to go, mostly because the FaceTime with other people is so worth it. Like, to connect with other people who fully understand what biohacking is for like one weekend, it just makes it worth it. Even if you're not a speaker or you don't have a booth or a brand, like even just as a person, I was on such a high after last year and I can't wait to go back.
Absolutely. You're hitting the nail on the head right there, because you're right. So many people just really don't understand a lot of these concepts that we talk about, right? And this was the perfect place for us to launch the new laser that we developed, because I don't have to sit there and tell people why, light can really influence our health, why we need to be using laser and light therapy for our liver or for our brain, or, whatever it is. Like, I don't have to get into those conversations because they already know. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can skip the whole, what is photobiomodulation? How does it work? That whole gist that people do. Have you considered going to, before we get into it more, have you considered going to like Health Optimization Summit, or are there other conferences that you recommend that are kind of like similar to what you're interested in?
Yes. So I'm really looking at the A4M conference. That's probably the next thing in our targets. I'm a clinician by trade. Like, I love treating patients. I love being with my patients. I have a long history of actually consulting and teaching other providers of various types. I've worked with emergency room docs. I've worked with hospitalists. I've worked with nursing homes at a large scale. I've worked with chiropractors. I mean, you name it. So I love teaching. I love working with doctors. And so I really want to, yes, continue this, journey into the biohacking space, but I also want to really connect with medical professionals of all types, because honestly, when I started this journey and, doing laser and light therapy about 15 years ago, such a small percentage of medical professionals were using lasers in their practice. And I just started asking why. And everyone was like, well, because we don't know how. And I'm like, okay, well, that's ridiculous, because this is one of the safest modalities out there, and it has such a large upside when it comes to patient care and helping to accelerate healing. I don't understand why these providers are not using it, right? So I don't care if it's a physical therapist, if it's a gastroenterologist. I don't care what the doctor is. They need to be using some form of laser and light therapy. So I really want to continue to get into that space, help medical professionals really understand how to use this for their patients. So that's a big goal of mine.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so that kind of like your journey into photobiomodulation, using it in your practice, was just like you knew the benefits of it and you saw the gap, and then you kind of just went headfirst into it?
Yes and no. So I've always been fascinated with light, oddly enough. So I ended up actually, as a young child, I needed a chest reconstruction surgery. I had this deformity to where my heart was actually beginning to be kind of exposed because my rib cage was turning so much. And so I went in to do the surgery, and my parents were like, what do you want? We'll get you anything for recovery. And, they were probably thinking like a video game or, something like this. I was like, I want a laser. And they were like, what? And I'm like, yeah, give me. And at the time, it was like this little pin light laser. And, back then they were expensive. Like a little pin light laser like that today would probably be like $5 or $10. So it was like $150, And they're like, what in the world do you want a laser for? I was so infatuated just with light and lasers, even as a young child. It's just interesting. And then fast forward, when I was doing my my functional neurology training, I was actually able to be the protege of Dr. John D'Onofrio, who was the first president of the Chiropractic Neurology Board. And so he was working on a case. I got to, be in on the case with him. I was still learning, and it was a genetic brain disorder. And this type of brain disorder typically does not develop, right? And so they kind of came to him as a last ditch effort, and they're, saying, hey, anything that you can throw at this scenario. Like, we want to try because the other doctors are just saying we don't have any other options. And I looked at him, I was like, what are we going to do? And he said, well, we're going to use laser on this kid. And, I was still in school. So this was probably 16, 17 years ago. And I'm like, okay, is there any, type of evidence that we should be doing this? And he was like, well, the physics makes sense. The neurophysiology makes sense. He's like, the research will come. And I thought that was interesting because it has, and it's come in spades, actually. And so we began using laser therapy on this little baby. And through the year that, we were doing this, the baby just began to develop more. And finally, they went in for a checkup with their neurologist, and the neurologist walks into the room, looks at them, and then walks out. And, the parents were like, what the heck? And the doctor comes back in and he goes, I think we have the wrong patient here. And they're like, no, this is our kid. This is, we saw you a year ago. And he's like, well, we must have misdiagnosed you. And so the brain developed and the kid developed quite well, actually. And by observing that, I knew right then and there that I was going to be in this laser space for the entirety of my career. I witnessed a miracle. I saw how big of a change and how safe this is. And it just really, set forth my trajectory into this space.
Are you feeling drained, struggling with low energy, or noticing that your body just isn't bouncing back like it used to? The culprit might be declining NAD+ levels in your cells. NAD+ is a vital molecule found in every cell of your body. It converts nutrients into energy and activates essential cellular processes. But as we age, our NAD+ levels naturally decline, leading to reduced energy, slower recovery, and overall poor cellular health. Stresses like intense workouts, disrupted sleep, and alcohol can make this decline even worse. But thankfully, there is good news. I love to use Nuchido Time Plus. This is a breakthrough NAD supplement designed to combat these issues. I actually get asked all the time what NAD supplement I use, and this is the one. It is backed by a patented formulation and clinically proven in a double-blinded studies. Nuchido Time Plus targets the root causes of NAD+ decline. It uses advanced science to boost your NAD+ levels, supporting better energy, faster recovery, and enhancing overall health. I have an exclusive offer just for my listeners, and you can use code BiohackingBrittany at checkout to get 10% off of your order. Don't let declining NAD levels hold you back any longer. Elevate your health and unlock your full potential with Nuchido Time Plus. Remember, that's code BiohackingBrittany for 10% off your order. Take charge of your cellular health today. Wow, I love that. That's really encouraging to hear. Yeah, I'm in the fertility pregnancy journey myself, so I am very interested in baby health and optimizing baby health. Sounds ridiculous, but especially if there are issues like that, that is really significant. Is that kind of something that you do in your practice today? Do you continue to work with babies and children in order to help their brains develop in a much better way, but also just such a safe and non-invasive way as well?
Yes. So my fellowship in functional neurology is in developmental functional neurology. So I actually specialize in childhood neural development. And what that's allowed me to do is actually help a lot of some of the most severe pediatric brain injuries from around the world. I did not begin this career thinking I would be in the pediatric brain injury space specifically, but that's really where I've ended up. Now, we still work with autism and all types of neurodevelopmental disorders. I myself have struggled with Tourette's and OCD, and you would never know that just because of the things that we do. So I've been able to literally cure myself of that. And we're really getting into the CRPS space now, chronic regional pain syndrome, people traveling from all over the world for that. But the answer is yes. I'm able to work with all types of kiddos, some of the most dire situations. Honestly, I've had to work with a trauma therapist myself because I am a father. And, some of these cases, when you start working on them, it pulls at your heartstrings. But interestingly enough, I was able to work with a kiddo not that long ago. She came in and I remember the initial consult. I'll never forget it. Like I was talking with the parents, and it was yet another, genetic abnormality. It was actually a very rare condition, aprosencephaly. Basically, I would say about 2/3 of the kiddo's brain was not present. It just did not develop. And the parents were just pleading, begging, saying, "Can you help us? Can you help us?" No one is willing to work with our child. And I'm like, "What do you mean no one's willing to work with your child?" And they said, "Well, everyone just looks at the MRI and they dismiss us and they say, go get on hospice. There's nothing you can do." And I looked at the kiddo, and the kiddo is looking at me and babbling and moving and doing all these things. The kid has a life. And I just asked him, I'm like, "Is your child developing?" And they said, "Yes, she's getting stronger. She's doing things that they said she would never do." I said, "Then yes, we'll work with her. Like, come on." So I did the exam. We started working with her, and holy smokes, has she just continued to grow and develop in ways that were never thought possible. So it's been amazing. And my journey, my early career actually was in that fertility space as well. Not many people know that. I worked with all the main midwives in the Austin, Texas area. Actually just recently did a podcast with one of our midwives from our most recent birth. So I was actually doing a lot of chiropractic and like holistic health work on the side, like in addition to my functional neurology practice. In fact, I would combine a lot of these functional neurology things when working with pregnant women. Like, for example, if you want to avoid morning sickness and being nauseous all the time, we actually have a way to stimulate the vagus nerve. Every woman in my practice that has gotten pregnant that has done this does not have morning sickness. It's been quite amazing. And then even things like watching primitive reflexes return in a pregnant woman, and then being able to help integrate those and seeing how much better they do. And then obviously working with the babies right after they're born and helping with the latch and helping them develop. And yes, you can absolutely biohack a newborn baby. I mean, we do it all the time. Obviously, the parents need to be leading the charge in that, and they need to be wanting it, because we're not treating a condition. You know what I mean? We're just offering advice on how to help your kiddo develop. But there's so many different things that one can do.
I love that so much. That's so exciting for me to hear. I'm due with my first very shortly. So it's very top of mind for me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And honestly, it's really encouraging to, like I said kind of before, like to just hear that there are alternative solutions to these massive problems that people are going through. And I don't know yet, but I could only imagine what that would feel like if it's your kid and not your health. Like I could only just imagine the heartbreak and my goodness, like the trauma. And I would do everything under the sun, right? To like make the baby healthier, like especially as a biohacker. I have a friend who has a 4-year-old boy, and he is on the neurodivergent scale, and he is, a bit autistic, and they're really struggling with his speech. I think he can put a few words together, but he's 4. He's like not where he necessarily should be. And she's doing like the YouTube videos and like trying to just help him, understand it in the best way she can. She's working full time. The dad's working full time, and here in Canada, like she can see a speech pathologist. She gets in once every 8 months. And that's kind of like all the support that they're really getting. So for someone like her, who's like, man, I really want to just help him develop faster and do more. Like, where would you suggest she starts? Like, if we're looking at autism and speech issues, like, what do you think about that? Can you kind of unpack that for us?
Absolutely. So we have to understand that the brain has this blueprint for development, right? So we know this because we see a baby develop in these milestones. We know that a baby needs to crawl before they walk, etc. Each of these milestones correlate with the brain network growth and maturation. Well, we can actually do an exam and identify areas of the brain that are under integrated, right? So they have not matured fully, while other parts of the brain may have matured. And in fact, maybe this 4-year-old has parts of the brain that are on par with a 7 or an 8-year-old, but then other networks, maybe they're still in the 6 to 12 months range. And that imbalance creates these asymmetries in how the brain fires and functions. And we have to understand that when all of these hubs in the brain fire in sync, right, that's where a brainwave comes in, right? So we need a certain type of brainwave to fire through the brain and connect all of these networks to then produce a function. So where I would start with with this situation is I would simply do our developmental functional neurology exam, and I'll tell you what we would likely find. We would most likely find some sensory abnormalities around the face and the tongue. We would still find some primitive reflexes intact on this kiddo. Primitive reflexes are things like the sucking reflex, the palmar grasp reflex, the spinal galant. Like these reflexes are connected to the brain. So for example, we're talking about speech, so let's talk about the face. When you go and touch the cheek of a baby, their mouth will contract, they'll turn towards the stimulus, and their tongue will start to thrust. And this is termed the sucking reflex, and it's to prime the baby to begin to nurse. And so that reflex, when it's stimulated, it's helping with survival, yes, but it's also, every time it's stimulated, it's actually developing the specific brain networks that it is attached to, right? Because there's this extremely intimate connection between the brain and the body. And what I always tell people is muscle tone reflects brain tone, right? So as the muscle tone improves, the muscle spindle is firing both efferently and afferently, so motor and sensory, to the brain. And as that brain develops, it's then talking back to those muscle spindles and either turning this reflex on for further development or turning it off, saying, hey, I'm developed. I don't need you anymore. So in this scenario, a 4-year-old should no longer have any of these primitive reflexes present. And the ones that are most connected to speaking, are going to be those reflexes in the face. So the sucking reflex, the hands, right? So you have your palmar grasp, you have your hand supporting reflex, and the spine. And those are the ones that we find most commonly associated with inabilities to speak. We would also need to identify the imbalances, right? So there may be more imbalance in the right side of the brain or the left side of the brain. Maybe just the Broca's area on the left, and maybe the rest of the imbalances are on the right. You know what I mean? There are people that would say, oh, it's all the right brain deficit or it's all the left brain deficit, but that's not really what I always find. I think we need to really be as specific as possible in all of these cases rather than just taking a one-size-fits-all approach in the hemispheric model, because I definitely see an intra-hemispheric issue in the majority of the kiddos I work with. So really it starts with identifying where the imbalances are, where are the immature networks or the under-integrated networks, and then deploying strategies, natural strategies that the body is using anyway to try and develop these networks, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying just to accelerate this natural process, this natural blueprint that we all have built within us. It's interesting because the body will literally tell you what it needs, right? You just have to know how to look for it. And then there's your roadmap for recovery is right there.
Yeah. Wow. That's so fascinating. And also just like so encouraging that there is things that we can do. And, doing this exam, like understanding really what's going on at a cellular level, I think is so key here. Once someone does this examination with you or your team, and you can kind of identify these areas of the brain that are like not lighting up and not working how we ideally want at that age of 4, what are some of the basic recommendations that you would make to kind of kickstart healing faster than maybe what the average parents are currently doing?
Sure. So we talk about fuel and activation. So we have 2 parallel paths. And fuel is going to involve all of those things that fuel the cell, right? So think about a Lamborghini, right? So I don't have a Lamborghini yet. It's maybe coming in the future. We shall see. I have some goals I need to achieve before I get that. But anyway, so you have this Lamborghini. It's a super fast car. It's amazing. You get in it. You try and turn it on. It has no gas. That Lamborghini does you no good, right? So we can have the most amazing therapies in place, the most amazing exercises and methods and all of these things. But if there's abnormal or inadequate cellular energy, cellular fuel, good luck. You're not going to get there. We need to ensure that the cell is properly fueled. And that largely does actually start this conversation about light, because so much of our cellular energy is derived from light, unless it's not, right? Unless you're spending all of your time under the high frequency white and blue light, you're eating, edible non-food like products, right? So eating just a bunch of junk and not really getting nutrients from it. Or maybe there's a raging neuroautoimmune disorder driving inflammation that could be driving anemia. And then there's another fuel problem, right? So there's several things that we need to investigate and rule out or, set in motion some type of treatment on the cellular fuel side. Of course, there could be toxic burdens. We live in a pretty nasty environment these days, unfortunately. And these toxic insults are a real thing. That's what I want people to understand. We are absolutely heavy laden with all types of things. I mean, you name it, anything from heavy metals to plastics to, hormones in the water to all types of things. So we do need to make sure that there's not a heavy toxic burden on the kiddo. The other thing that we're looking for are things like mold and mycotoxin exposure. That's a real problem. We actually had several miscarriages while we were living in a house with Stachybotrys and Chaetomium mold. And we finally figured it out. We moved out and we had our kiddo after that. But those are real concerns too. Whenever I'm working with kids overseas, I'll tell you, if they're from London, I'm doing a mycotoxin panel. I don't care what the problem is. That's a moldy city. So we have fuel and we have activation, right? So we first need to make sure that the cell is properly fueled. We'll employ several different strategies regarding laser and light therapy, because that is a very quick, safe, and effective way to begin to address these fuel needs of the cell. And then we'll begin to deploy these activation strategies. So these sensory approaches, these whatever it is that we need to do. Does that make sense?
If you're feeling out of sync with your hormones or struggling with fertility, I totally get it. I've been there and it can be so frustrating, but I found a delicious way to support your reproductive health. I have developed hormone balancing, fertility boosting chocolate. This isn't just any type of chocolate. It's packed with adaptogens like maca root and antioxidants from cacao and pomegranate. These ingredients can help regulate your hormones and support your preconception health and fertility. You need to download this recipe ASAP, okay? Because it's more than just a treat. It's a powerful way to nourish your body from the inside out. Imagine indulging in a rich, delicious chocolate that not only satisfies your sweet tooth, but also boosts your wellness. Whether you're trying to conceive, balance your hormones, or just crave a healthy indulgence that you get to make from home, where you get to control all of the ingredients and also optimize your health, this recipe is perfect for you. Don't miss out on this tasty, fertility enhancing, optimizing health solution. You can go to biohackingbrittany.com/pages/fertility-chocolate and download the recipe for free right now. Go for it. It's just right there waiting for you. It's linked in my show notes. It's linked on my website. You're going to find it super, super easy. So treat yourself to better health, one delicious bite at a time. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And I actually love how holistic your approach is. It's not just like, use this laser light therapy. It's also like, how are you nourishing your body? What is the other light that you're exposed to? Looking at mold. It's kind of similar with a lot of other health issues that people deal with, adults deal with, is like, how do we heal this?
One thing to bring up here is this concept of neural cell migration in the womb. And what I really want people to understand is that we do have an extremely intimate connection between our nervous system and light. And what has been buried actually in the research is that when a pregnant mom is exposed to too much of the high frequency white and blue light, so fluorescent lighting and things like this. And I've actually been able to uncover this just incidentally, by talking and working with so many OR nurses that are having kiddos born with developmental difficulties. But it can be OR nurses, it can be engineers, it can be architects, these people that are working inside under fluorescent lights all day and all night. So they have circadian rhythm abnormalities. They're constantly exposed to the wrong types of light. But this light exposure in a pregnant mom has been linked to issues in neural cell migration, neural crest cell migration in the womb. And then you have this situation where the baby is born with these neurological imbalances. So just wanted to point out to that. And it just makes sense because think about a pregnant mom and their belly, right? As it begins to expand, that skin is getting thinner, right? So by design, that developing fetus, that developing baby, is supposed to have a higher exposure to the right types of light by design. The womb is getting a little thinner as it begins to grow and expand. The skin is thinning, etc. That baby is coming closer to the surface. This is just how we're designed. Now, if that's happening and light can have such a profound effect on the developing baby, which it does, well, the wrong types of light can also have a profound impact on the developing baby as well. That's one thing that I really want people to hear and to take home is that, look, yes, we can talk about all these things. And I think that there's so many different references for anything from, toxic exposures to, you name it, all the things. But no one's really talking about that, right? And I think that we need to understand the intimacy between our nervous system and light, even when we're in the womb.
Yeah, I love that. That's so interesting. Would you recommend then for pregnant women to prioritize like sunning their belly, like getting direct sunlight on their belly in order to support their health of their baby and their development?
Absolutely. Yes, it is. It's necessary. Both mom and baby need that. Absolutely 100%.
Interesting, because I was doing that at the beginning of my pregnancy and then I stopped because my friend said that because the skin is thinner, it ends up becoming darker and tanner. And then after the baby, it takes a while for all of like your stomach pigment to kind of all look the same again. And I was like, oh, I don't want to have like this weird coloring. But now thinking it through like this, I actually just sunned my baby, sounds weird, sunned my belly this morning while I was meditating outside for about half an hour. Now I'm definitely going to prioritize this for the last few weeks because, we want that vitamin D and we want also, I want my baby to get whatever benefits I can from nature in this way.
Absolutely. Your skin will act like a natural protective mechanism for you, right? So when you're in the sun, you'll start to feel that kind of hot and warm feeling, right? So that warm feeling then transitions to like this tingling feeling, right? When you start to feel that tingle and it starts to get a little hotter, that's your skin telling you, hey, you might be getting a little too much. If your, skin is colored like mine, you can start to see kind of that pinkish hue start to, come in. When you start to get that, again, it's your skin saying, hey, let's reduce the dose. And so then what do? You go find some shade. One interesting thing is the use of sunglasses. If you block your eyes from the sunlight while your body is exposed to it, you will actually reduce your melanin, right? So you have a higher likelihood of being sunburnt. Now, I'm not promoting, to stay outside and get sunburnt. Again, we have natural protective mechanisms. We don't want to get sunburnt. So this is a balance here. But ideally, you're out there, your eyes are not covered up. Your eyes are being exposed to the sunlight. Your brain is responding to it. Your neuroendocrine system is responding to it. And you're able to increase your melanin stores. And melanin, that has a lot to do with cellular energy as well. It acts like a semiconductor in your cells. So again, just another way to drive, energy in your body. I always think of melanin like my batteries, right? So if I have a nice healthy tan, I know that my batteries are charged and I'm ready to go. If I go and I'm at a conference for several days in a row, and I end up pale, then I'm like, okay, I got to recharge my batteries.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're lucky you live in a place where you can do that. I'm assuming like year round. In Canada, it's not as easy, but there are kind of ways to kind of mitigate that. The last thing I want to ask you, just going back to the babies and the child health, I know you kind of touched upon this with potentially like nutritional deficiencies, toxin exposure, mold, but in your opinion, what do you think is the root cause of this increase that we're seeing in neurodivergent issues or autism or speech issues? Like, do you think there is one simple root cause, or like, why is this skyrocketing now in the children that we're having today?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the one root cause is actually a multifactorial cause. So the one root cause is this discussion around perceived threat. And I say perceived threat, right? Because something that is being perceived as a threat to you may not be perceived as a threat to me. Does that make sense? Now, as we're navigating this high-tech society, the society that is largely moving onto the phone and onto the computer, and after having exposures like what happened in 2020, where we heavily segregated ourselves, these things have a very intimate impact on the development of our nervous system. So as we continue to lose touch with society, our brain is not developing like it should. And now we're more prone to have these perceived threats, to have this heightened stress response. And that stress response is not going to allow a brain to thrive. So the brain is really concerned with two things, and that's safety and efficiency, right? So if a brain is surviving, it's doing its job. It's keeping you safe, staying efficient. But thriving is another thing, right? We want to thrive, especially in the biohacking space. So we need to understand what technology is doing to us. We need to understand that we have to have social connections. We need to understand that while I greatly appreciate traditional medicine, I greatly appreciate acute care, urgent care medicine, etc., sometimes those things are overused, right? Sometimes we need to get back to nature and we need to go, okay, my neurophysiology, my biology is dysfunctional. How is it supposed to work? What's up with my circadian rhythm? That's like the foundation, right? And interestingly, if you look at the rise of chronic disease, not just neurodevelopmental disorders, but the rise of chronic disease, it mirrors the increase in light pollution that we have in our world today, right? And this is true of any developing country. So while we can sit here and point the finger at seed oils or vaccines or what have you, and by the way, look, I'm not a proponent of vaccines. I think that they can be useful for some people. I chose not to for my family. But again, we can, point the finger at so many different things. But what really correlates is this light pollution, this increase in bad light, if you will. And those are the countries where you see chronic illness skyrocketing, things like neurodevelopmental disorders, et cetera. So I do think that there is this heavy interplay between the wrong type of light exposure, disrupting circadian rhythm, causing these chronic stress responses, these perceived threats because you have a dysfunctional vagal system. And now you have the inability to really integrate properly in society because your social networks are not properly developed and you have these imbalances in your brain. Your brain is surviving, it's not thriving. So I think it's a culmination of multiple things. But ultimately, if I had to call it one thing, it's this increase in perceived threats.
Oh, I love that you call it that. I think that's such an interesting way to put it. And I was curious if you were going to talk about technology and, the iPad kid and the iPad baby notion. What do you recommend to, maybe your patients or everybody listening? Like, if they were going to introduce an iPad or TV shows, like what age do you think that they should be introduced at for optimal, neural development?
Well, for optimal neural development, the answer would be never. We're talking about digital hypodermic needles. Okay. Now, I've been fortunate. I've had a very interesting career. I do business consulting on multiple levels. I was actually asked to work with a social media app, and they literally hired me to get people addicted to their app. Like when they hired me, they said, okay, Brandon, this is what we want you to do. We want you to get people addicted to our app. They said, can you do that? I said, well, yes, I can do that. I know what eye movements, I know what colors, I know the increments of time that need to be used. I know how to do that, but I'm not going to do that. And they're like, why not? I'm like, well, because you're talking about, increasing the problem here. So I deployed a strategy to actually negate it, right? So I deployed a strategy to get someone engaged, but then to break the addictive cycle. And you can do that with eye movements. But the answer is never, but that's not a feasible response, because we live in a society where that kid is going to have to be on technology for school. That kid is going to have friends, and you need them to interact. And unfortunately, a lot of that interaction is on a video game or is on some kind of chat room or whatever it is. So unfortunately, it is a balance of, okay, how much do we need to do so that my kiddo can have friends and my kiddo can interact in school? So now we're having to play a balancing act. And so for every minute that my kiddos are on technology, they have to spend a minute outside. And that's how we balance it. And by the way, it doesn't count if you're just on the iPad or whatever while you're outside. That doesn't I've had so many people bring that up to me. Now, what I don't want to see, and I cringe when I see it, is the iPad or phone being a babysitter. And I'm not judging. I'm not judging, because I've been there. I've been there with a screaming kid. I see it in the office all the time. It's not the parent's fault. It's something that has been made easy. And look, if you want to compare it, think about the smoker that's having a stressful time. They're having a bad day. What do? They reach for a cigarette. Why do they do that? They get that hit of noradrenaline. They get that hit of dopamine, calms their nervous system. It's the same thing with your baby, right? So when they're having a bad day, when they're getting pissed off and frustrated and they don't want to do what you're doing, well, just think about, okay, I'm giving them a cigarette, calming them down. Do you really want to do that for your baby? Or do you want to pick them up? You want to soothe them. You want to talk to them. You want to say, look, here's the scenario we're in. I'm sorry you don't like it. I don't care if it's a 6-month-old baby. You still need to have these conversations with them. And the touch that they need is going to calm their nervous system better. It may not do it immediately like an iPad would, but it's going to regulate and integrate the nervous system so that they can develop their social brain centers and they can develop their brain properly, rather than just getting addicted to a high frequency stimulus that then they're going to be seeking for more and more and more, right? So that's my answer on that. I hope that makes sense.
If there's one mineral you should be worried about not getting enough of, it's magnesium. Magnesium is the body's master mineral. It's powerful, and it's involved in over 600 critical reactions, including hormone balance, stress management, sleep quality. Even digestion is influenced by the presence of magnesium. But there are two big problems here. One, magnesium has been largely missing from U.S. soil since the 1950s, which explains why it's estimated that up to 75% of the population may be deficient. And two, most supplements contain only 1 or 2 forms of magnesium, when in reality, your body needs 7. The only magnesium supplement on the market that has the full spectrum of all 7 forms is called Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. This is my favorite. I've been taking it for over 2 years. That's why I'm so excited to tell you that I was able to arrange a killer deal for you for this summer. You won't find this deal on Amazon or even on the company's own website. This deal is exclusively for my audience, and it's for a very, very limited time and only while supplies last. So right now you can actually get a bottle of Magnesium Breakthrough for free. Like actually, you get it for free. I'm not kidding. So go now to my website that they made for me, which is magbreakthrough.com/biohackingbrittanyfree, and get your bottle of Magnesium Breakthrough for free today. Again, that's magbreakthrough.com/biohackingbrittanyfree, and you get it for free. So go now. It's linked in my show notes of this episode, and it's linked on my website, so you can find it really easily, or just DM me and I will send it to you as well. All of us should be on magnesium, and this is my absolute favorite one to take. No, it completely makes sense. And I love that rule that you have of like a minute on the screen, a minute outside. I think that's really smart and effective, and obviously works for, kids who are older. I imagine kids who are like 3 would, not necessarily understand that. But yeah, I can't even judge. Like, I don't have a kid yet. I can't say anything on this really because it just sounds so, people listening are probably like, you have no idea what it's like to have a baby crying. And it's so much easier to just hand them your phone and let them play a game in the waiting room than to try to like soothe them.
It
So
is. Yeah, like I said, I've been there. It is, and look, I've done it. So I'm not going to say I'm perfect. Like we've done it before, so I understand like totally. But you're right. It is. It's like, man, I can do this right now and get a result versus okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. So it is extremely hard.
yeah, it's interesting just in general. Like, it's such a comfort measure. Life in general, especially in North America, has become so convenient and so comfortable that, we don't really have to do much. We don't have to do anything hard. We don't have to, I can choose to just give my kid an iPad every day and like, there you go. Now I can go work and not have to worry about them. And it just creates these long-term health impacts that we're seeing. And it's very scary when we're talking about children and babies. I just find it like horrific. And then I think, okay, this generation of iPad kids, what are they going to be like in their 30s and 40s and 50s? Like, how are they going to break that addiction that they've literally had since, I don't know, 6 months or a year old?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's insane, and you're right. We are living in a society that is promoting comfort, but we have to understand that these dopamine networks, it's all about pain and pleasure, right? So we need to balance that. And now we as biohackers know this because what do? We're crazy people that we jump in ice water, right?
Yeah.
But that's all about negating all of those comforts and making your body suffer a little bit so that then you can actually experience pleasure how it's supposed to be experienced. Because if all you experience is pleasure, 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 comfort, 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 you're going to end up depressed and anxious and pissed off at the world because at some point you're not going to be able to actually neurochemically experience that pleasure and that comfort like you used to. Right. And so that's why this pain pleasure balance is so important. And why, I don't know if all the biohackers understand this. There's so many reasons to do cold plunges, but especially if you live in, North America, like you mentioned, and, you do get to drive a nice car to work and you get to sleep in a comfortable bed and, you're not having to worry about food and all of these things, right? It's a very comfortable life. And I appreciate that. But, our brain needs to experience pain every now and then. And I don't know how else to say that, but our neurochemistry dictates that.
Yeah, it builds mental resiliency, right? Like, you are embracing discomfort and then you're getting through it and then you're able to build on that. And like you're saying, like I was saying, there's very few things now that are like that. Do you kind of take this same approach with your kids or have recommendations for building kind of like that pain, embracing discomfort when it comes to kids?
Yes. So my children both do cold plunges, FYI. I have them in physical training, different programs. Now, my kids right now are 13 and 9. Okay. So just for reference there. But I do, like, I need them to understand. And we have conversations about why it's important, to push your body at times and to not always be comfortable. And that's not always a physical thing. Sometimes that's going to a new school. Sometimes that's going to a new friend group or, something like that and experiencing uncomfort socially as well. Right. So engaging in those conversations with my kids, yes, we do that. And yes, they do cold plunges. They do not like them, but I tell you, I'm like, no one likes a cold plunge. I don't like getting in the cold water. I love it afterwards. And that's the thing. They'll, be like, oh, Dad, really again? But then when they get out, they're like, man, that was awesome. I'm like, yeah, that's that little surge of dopamine you just got. You're welcome. And so they, they'll do it again. And by the way, I do this with autistic kiddos all the time. I do it with kiddos on the spectrum all the time, especially if we're detoxing someone, because when you get in that cold water, you're producing very weak UVA light. You're producing biophotons. You're improving detox systems and multiple things, right? Once you've done a cold plunge 3 to 5 times, you're actually really greatly improving the vagus nerve. And if you're improving the vagus nerve, you're improving all your detox pathways. So I'm doing this with kiddos on the spectrum, right? I'll have them start with their feet and move to their hands and their face, etc. And most of them, they get in the cold water and they just sit down. It's like joyful experience almost, right? I think it's the sensory experience that they were seeking. I don't know what it is, but they've actually, done very well with that. So that is something that I've actually used clinically.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, that's so fun. Like must be fun to just have a little like biohacking family. And I also think exercise is actually really smart for building that mental resiliency, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's a longer hike than kids are used to, or sports or training, whatever it is. Like there are moments where you have to push through discomfort, obviously, when you're training and exercising. So that's a really great one that I love to hear. With the cold therapy, do you have a recommendation in terms of like age that you would start that as? And also, do you do any like saunas or heat therapy as well?
Absolutely. So like I was saying earlier, I'm on the board for Sunlight and Saunas. So I absolutely love the combination of sauna with cold. There's so many different ways that we can discuss that, but let's go to the age discussion first. So clinic, we will use cold packs on newborn babies' faces. We will use cold packs on the bottoms of the feet, on the palms of the hand, right? So I'm not putting that baby in a cold plunge, but I am using cold on areas that are associated with what's called glabrous skin. And the skin is more intimately connected to our brain. And so it helps us to produce these effects without dunking that kid in ice water. So that's how we'll use it there. And honestly, like even when your baby's born, like you can use a little bit of cold on their cheeks. You can use a little bit of cold on their hands and their feet, and just do it in increments of like 5 to 10 seconds, right? We will monitor a baby's heart rate and oxygen while we do this. And initially, when you do it, of course, it's like a shock. And so you'll see the heart rate go up a little bit, but then you'll see the vagus nerve kick on and you'll see the heart rate start to come down and you'll see the oxygen levels go up. So it's a really interesting thing to note there. So I'm doing this with, kiddos of all ages, but that includes newborns. At some point, that kid's going to be mature enough to where they can begin to attempt a cold plunge. That's going to be different for everyone, right? That could be a 3-year-old, that could be a 10-year-old. It really just kind of is highly dependent on that person. And then, yes, we're going to use saunas in multiple ways. I love the use of cold exposure earlier in the day. It increases your noradrenaline, your dopamine levels, etc. So it helps you wake up and get moving and get active for the day. Sauna at nighttime or evening before bed is ideal. It does help to, get ready for bed. It helps you get sleepy, helps you fall asleep faster, etc. by its influence on the hypothalamus and regulating body temperature. But then I also like the experience of contrast therapy. So I love going from sauna to cold plunge. This is going to also help increase growth hormone to a larger degree whenever you do it like this. You can actually alternate. You can go sauna, cold plunge. Like you can do that for like an hour straight sometimes is what I'll do. But it does help increase growth hormone. And growth hormone is important. It's not just about growth. It helps regulate inflammation. It helps with stem cell growth and differentiation, proliferation. It helps with cardio protection. It helps with fibrosis. So it can actually help reduce scar tissue. It helps with vascular tone. It does so many different things, right? So I love contrast therapy. I think that can be a very, very powerful use of sauna and cold plunge. Of course, with sauna, there's also detox and things like that we could talk about for an hour. But those are just some of the ways that I like to use sauna as well.
Yeah, I love that. I've had a regular sauna practice probably for like 5 years now, maybe. And I just ordered my first own sauna. Like I've had sauna blankets at home and sauna chairs and like all these weird things and gone to saunas, but I just ordered one. It comes in October and it's an outdoor, like traditional sauna, which is my favorite kind. I also love, the infrared, but I chose to do the outdoor one. And I'm so excited. And we also have a ice barrel already. So I'm going to be doing the contrast therapy. I usually like to do 20 minutes in the sauna and then, a couple minutes in cold and then do that 3 times. I will have to build up to that again after pregnancy because there's no way I could do that right now. But that I feel like $1 million after I do that for an hour. It's like you're on such a high. My body feels amazing. I almost like it more than working out, to be honest. Like there's something about being in a parasympathetic mode and being able to sweat at the same time and also just mentally think through all my problems in the sauna, I just feel the best.
Yeah. Well, heat shock protein activation is real. There's really good things. You get really good neurochemical regulation while you're in there. It's a fantastic thing. I mean, for me personally, I mean, I've had 2 back surgeries. I still have a herniated disc in my back. I've got a torn meniscus. I have a torn MCL in my knee. I have not had those repaired. And, just the other day, I ran for 52 minutes straight in the 100-degree heat in Texas, and I feel great, right? And the reason why I'm able to operate still like this, like I am, I will tell you it's because of the practice of cold therapy, sauna use, and laser therapy, right? So I have this routine where I'll do my workout. Whether I'm weightlifting and or running, or I'm just running for the day or whatever it is. And then I'll do my contrast therapy. And then after all of that, then I'll use the laser. I'll do multiple different types of laser protocols, but I'll definitely use it over those injury sites, like my low back and my knees, etc. And like right now, I have zero pain in my body. And if you were to look at my MRIs, you'd be like, what the heck? This guy should be in pain. But I feel great.
That's awesome. Oh, good for you. Sounds like a really hard run, to be honest, in that heat. So good job.
I'm that weirdo that likes to push himself. I'll sprint up a hill in the heat until I start to see spots. I love that zone 5. So I have to make myself come down into the zone 2, zone 3, because I don't like them. They're too boring.
Oh, fair. Yeah, just chasing the high. Yeah, good for you. I feel like I could pick your brain all day, but I would love for you to tell everybody where they can connect with you. And if they want to work with you, maybe they have kids that need support or they need support themselves. Please let us know how we can work with you.
Absolutely. So I do have a personal brand website that's going to be kind of a culmination of all the things that I do. So that's drbrandоncrawford.com. So drbrandоncrawford.com. My clinical practice, I personally practice in the Austin, Texas area in Cedar Park. That website is neurosolutionatx.com. We actually are just opening a neurosolution center in Dubai. Actually, I was up until about 3 a.m. just this past morning. That's why I'm still drinking my coffee at the moment, because my circadian rhythm got kind of hit last night. But we are opening in Dubai, so that's exciting. I do also have an office in Atlanta, so neurosolutionatl.com is my Atlanta office. On Instagram, that's where you can see a lot of our patient stories and things that we do. My Instagram handle is B as in boy, my last name Crawford, Crawford. D as in dog, C as in cat. So it's B Crawford DC. That's my Instagram handle, and that's where you can really, get a window into all the things that we do. So those are the ways to connect and to see more about what we do.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I will definitely put that in the show notes and on my website so people can find you easily. This has been awesome. I just appreciate all of your insights. I feel like I've learned so much. Thank you for coming on the show. This was just great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Biohacking with Brittany. If you're interested in finding the show notes or the sponsors for this episode, you can do so on my website, which is biohackingbrittany.com. Remember to follow me on Instagram, where I'm most active. My handle is @biohackingbrittany. And if you're interested in working together and you want to email me directly, you can do that. My email is info@biohackingbrittany.com. And I look forward to hearing from you and having you tune in next week.